All right, welcome into the Autzen Audibles post-game edition, I guess Big Ten Championship post-game edition. Eric Scopel from Indy, Jared Mack, I'm Matt Preem. 45-37, the Oregon Ducks. I guess I thought Oregon would score a lot. I don't know if I thought they'd score 45 in this game. I didn't think they'd have to score 45 to win the game, but here they are. It turned into a offensive shootout. Neither team could really stop the other one. Penn State over 500 yards of total offense. I believe that's the most yards allowed by Oregon this season. 466 yards for Oregon against the Penn State defense. Just 2 total sacks between these two teams. We talked so much about the front sevens and the pressures that they could create, and there really wasn't anything there. Both teams were unbelievably good in the red zone. Collectively, 9 trips into the red zone. This was just an offensive shootout, and quite honestly, I don't know about you guys, I never really felt like fear they were going to lose, because this was, if it was going to be played a certain way, this is what Oregon wanted. Penn State did not want an offensive shootout, because as we saw at the end, Drew Aller made a mistake. He threw a deep shot, probably didn't need to throw it. Interception, iced the game by Nico Reed. Oregon's more comfortable playing in these types of games where it's just back and forth, historically at least. And, that's where I'm speaking from. It's not what Penn State's bread and butter is, and that's kind of what played out.
Yeah, they surpassed my game score by halftime. It was a Big Ten record. By the way, I'm excited to chat with you guys because usually we're talking at the game. I don't know exactly how you feel about everything. I just know I watched a really fun football game that Oregon is 13-0 and can hoist a conference championship for the first time in 5 years. So a really fun time to be out there in Indy. It was cool being on the field around everything. You kind of get a feel for the emotion of it all. Dan was, I don't want to say crying necessarily, but welling up as he was hugging his parents and talking to people that clearly mean a lot to him as he left. And it was just really exciting to see Oregon come through on a big stage. Not that they don't always, but think about last year in the Pac-12 championship and kind of the disappointment of that. I thought this was an opportunity for some redemption. I wrote about it on the site, and they did it. And to Matt's point, they did it in a way that none of us expected. I mean, credit to Penn State for scoring a lot more points than I thought they would. And credit to Drew Aller for, the last touchdown they threw was amazing on 4th down. He's being dragged down, and he throws a dart into the end zone into like almost double coverage. Like a lot of times
like helicoptered on that play because they hit each other so hard.
Yeah, there were some, and it was there. We can get through all the big plays because there were a ton, but I thought there was a lot of resiliency here. Obviously, I think fans are disappointed in the defense. I get that. You don't want to give up 37 points, season highs in yardage as well. But at the end of the day, they win the game. They're the only undefeated team. They're going to be the number 1 seed going into the college football playoff when all that is sorted out tomorrow. And now you don't have to go through that opening round. You get the bye. And people can debate whether or not that's better than playing the 5-12. We've already made our points clear there. But I think this was really fun. And now the next time you see this team on the field, it's going to be, I think, in Pasadena on New Year's Day.
It is in Pasadena.
Which is just a really fun place to be. You can't really complain about a season when you end up in the Rose Bowl at some point.
No, you certainly can't. Really, really fun game. Was more like a Big 12 championship game, or at least what they have been in years past. Like you guys have both said, a lot more offense than any of us anticipated. Penn State runs for nearly 300 yards. Oregon's rush defense was non-existent. But Penn State's defense wasn't much better. Penn State actually, outgained Oregon 518 to 466 yards. I really think that this game kind of came down to Dante Manning's near pick 6 in the first half, and Oregon needed just one more play from the 1-yard line to get in for 7 points. That kind of became, like the crux of this game in the second half when it was, a 2-touchdown game or a 1-score game there late. Was that interception by Manning, which seemed, like a great play at the time. You didn't know if there was going to be a lot of consequences towards it because, at that point, Oregon had taken a huge lead, a big first quarter lead, a big second, or like heading into the second quarter lead. You felt that this could be maybe an easy night for Oregon. Their defense was playing better. They had just forced interception. You thought that this could be like not a blowout per se, but an easier night, maybe something that the Penn State, the James Franklin can't show up in a big game would come again, and the Penn State immediately battled back. I thought Drew Aller had a lot of good throws this game. I thought he had a lot of weird throws this game, which was kind of like the full Drew Aller experience if you've watched him this season and even most of last season as well. But Singleton and Allen were awesome running backs. I thought Penn State's offensive line was phenomenal today. They did not allow any real pressures from the edges, and Jordan Birch, Mateo Uiagalelei. Derek Harmon got the only sack. There was only, I guess, technically 2 tackles for loss. Bryce Betcher was the only person to have one outside of Harmon. They did a really good job of neutralizing Oregon's pass rush, and Andy Koldenicki, the offensive coordinator for Penn State, called an excellent game. I thought both offensive coordinators were awesome. They had these 2 defenses dialed in. They knew exactly what to run, just to limit where they were, where the opposing team's defense's strengths were. I mean, Abdul Carter had 6 tackles, not a single tackle for loss, not a single sack. Like, Oregon knew what they were doing on their side. It was a very fun offensive game, which I don't think anybody expected. And I'm here for it. That was a lot of fun. But it was certainly a little nerve-wracking there at the end when Oregon goes 3 and out and gives the ball back to Penn State with like just over 2 minutes, I believe it was, remaining in the game. Because, I mean, we'll get to it later, but the James Franklin decision to go for 2 there in the fourth quarter early was a decision. If it was nothing else, it was certainly a decision. And you had a little bit of comfort there because it's an 8-point game, and it's still 1 score, but it's a lot harder to get a 2-pointer than a point after. But still some heart racing moments there. So great game, great conference championship game. Exactly what you wanted. 2 top 5 teams meeting in the conference championship game.
You mentioned like the comfort level. I think we should note too, like how maybe they got there is up for debate whether it was the right decision or not. But Oregon kicking that field goal in the last 10 seconds of the first half. In 2022, Dan Lanning for sure is like doing something crazy, going for it with Kenny Dillingham as the OC. Last year, maybe even then, we're seeing them do something. But that field goal combined with the 2-point conversion kind of gave that Penn State failed, kind of gave Oregon some separation. And to Jared's point, like the Manning interception was the game changer. It was the one that gave Oregon the difference in the game. I also think Penn State kicking that field goal early on when they got within, it was like middle of the field. Yeah, it wasn't like 100% go for it, but also it wasn't hey, you automatically need to kick this field goal. I thought that decision was a pretty big one too, of a moment where a game in which neither team is really stopping each other, and he leaned on his defense to try and get the stop. It didn't work. Oregon went right down and scored. Now, to his credit, his defense did get the stop in the last 3 minutes of the game to give them a chance to go down the field to score a potential tying touchdown. But it was just an awesome game, like you guys said, and it will probably go down as one of the better games this season. But nonetheless, Oregon walks out 13-0, and I think this is a game in which it was played offensively, the physicality of it, the totality of the season. Like, Oregon's the best team in the country, and they're going into the playoffs, like Eric said, with a 3-week bye. It's probably much really needed, rest up, and they're the only team that's been able to do this, go 13-0 this season, playing this level of football. And it's an exciting time. It's an exciting year. Oregon's the king of the Pac-12, the Big Ten. I almost said the Pac-12, but nonetheless, you walk out of this with so many storylines and I guess just big moments for guys. We probably should mention Tez. Like,
yeah, he's pretty good.
Career day, and I think he changes the offense. We knew this would happen, but this is a clear indicator of, oh yeah, they're pretty good and pretty different when he's back. Oregon
also low-key still king of the Pac-12 because they did beat Pac-12 champion Oregon State. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear to those listening. Tez, let's talk about him because last week he didn't really make an impact in the first half. Obviously, it was good to see him getting in the second half, but it didn't necessarily feel like a game where they needed him to win. I mean, they were in control of that game really throughout. They needed basically every catch, and he had a lot of big ones. I was just looking at it. 6 catches of his 11 went for at least 15 yards. I think 3 or 4 of them were on third down. Obviously, the biggest sequence offensively probably for this team was that final scoring drive where they faced the 3rd and 9 and they hit Tez on the 16-yard gain to get, I think, a little past midfield. And then a couple plays later, 4th and 2, not surprised they went for it, but maybe I'm a little surprised they decided to chuck it 15, 20 yards down the field to Terrence Ferguson. And that was kind of where the game was ultimately decided because they're able to score to go back up by 2 scores. But I mean, back to Tez, very deserving of the Big Ten championship MVP, in my opinion. He got my vote. I think he got pretty much all the Oregon contingent's vote from all the people I was talking to up in the press box. And I just thought he came through with the biggest plays when they were needed. And frankly, the other thing that really stood out, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, was the speed of Oregon versus Penn State. And I think for the most part, it didn't feel that drastic, but whenever Tez Johnson touched the football, it felt like that guy just has another gear. I just didn't think Penn State was very rarely were they able to get him down on, first contact or the first shot at him. And that's kind of what we were talking about when they didn't have him, right? Was they struggled yards after the catch against Maryland. They struggled yards after the catch clearly against Wisconsin, the 2 lowest numbers of the season. This is what we were talking about. These are the types of plays. This is the difference here of him turning, whether it's a 10-yard pass into a 25-yard pass or a screen into a first down. That's what he does for this offense. And I think you have to feel really excited by the fact that this offense is basically whole now with him back, with Marcus Harper not starting the game, but getting involved in the game. Just saying all the guys that are.
Yeah. I get you.
I did think it was notable that Dave started and played pretty much the whole first half. But going into the playoffs here now, they're not really missing anything offensively. And they needed that tonight, frankly, right? Because, I mean, I don't know if you win this game. I think you probably lose this game without Tez. And the defense didn't have a lot of answers. And unfortunately, the offense was good enough. And Tez deserves credit. I think the run game deserves credit. I thought both running backs had some really, really nice moments, and especially in the second half in some big spots. And then Dylan Gabriel, what can you say? Awesome game from him. Big stage. He wasn't afraid. I didn't think we didn't expect he would be, considering how experienced he is. But the most yards allowed by Penn State through the air all season, and the most touchdowns by a quarterback as well, 4, which I believe is a season high for him. So when the biggest stage, everything kind of mattered here. A lot of the kind of key core players showed up big, and that's what you needed tonight.
I thought this was Dylan's best game of the year, if I'm being honest.
Cosign. I agree.
That or Ohio State.
Yeah, those are the two.
That or Ohio
those
State.
are
And
those are the 2 biggest games.
Kind of important, yeah. Yeah, he was excellent. 22 of 32, 283 yards and 4 touchdowns, like Eric just touched on. I thought he just made all the easy decisions. There were a couple misses on some screen plays or whatever to his right and to his left. We kind of noted that during the game, but other than that, he was lights out. He was making really good reads. He would have had even more yards. I think it was a Trayshawn Holden on like a slant over the middle, just dropped it. And he would have got a first down. I don't know if he would have got a touchdown or anything like that, but he just made the great reads and he made great throws. And honestly, this was all within like 15, 20 yards of the line of scrimmage. They did not take any deep shots. Evan Stewart was, non-existent in this game. I think he just had a target. No catches, no anything like that. But it didn't matter. I thought this was a really complete offensive game. Eric, you mentioned it. Marcus Harper was back. I actually thought the offensive line was at their peak when it was Iuli and Struther. I thought that was the best kind of the combination duo that they had. They brought in Harper a couple times, but we talked about it before the game where we thought Harper would be able to go, but it's like, would he be the guy? Like, would he get the start, or would it be Iuli and Struther? And I think that's just kind of like rust for Harper. It's his first game since Michigan. He was hurt. And I thought that they were really good with Iuli and with Struther there on the field. And the offensive line I thought was great. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, were we not surprised that it was Struther they took off and not Iuli there? Because
I think that was interesting. Yeah, they kept Iuli and they took out Struther, which I don't know. That was certainly notable. Yeah, like that was one of the first things I picked up on. I was like, all right, well, then they clearly like Harper, and I don't know. There's a whole hierarchy there, but I thought the offensive line was great. Like I said earlier, Abdul Carter didn't have a single tackle for loss or a sack, and that's he's going to be probably the first defensive lineman off the board, if not the first defensive player, however you want to quantify what Travis Hunter does. He was kind of non-existent. He was everywhere on the field, but he wasn't in the backfield against Dylan Gabriel, who routinely stepped up in the pocket and drove home some throws. Offensively, I don't know if this was their best game of the season. Not that they were bad or anything like that, but they were awesome. This was against a really good Penn State defense who had, kind of held everybody that they played this entire season, except for USC a little bit, like in check. That includes Ohio State holding them to 20 points and everybody else in the Big Ten. It was an excellent game from Will Stein too. I talked about that earlier, but I thought the play calling from him was really good. I know people weren't thrilled at some of those quick bubble screens at the beginning of drives sometimes, but those screens worked a couple of times. So, you can go back to the well every once in a while, but it seemed like when they needed it the most, the running game was there on like short yardage and third downs, and Gabriel was able to pick up a fourth down if they needed to. I thought it was just an excellent game from Oregon, who, kind of needed it because there was still some, bad vibes from what it looked like against Maryland and some bad vibes against what it looked like against Wisconsin. And, they came out and proved everybody wrong who was doubting them. And it looks like the offense did earlier in the season, just, kind of without Evan Stewart in there.
Yeah, I mean, we said like last week after Utah, I was like, yeah, they look really good, but it's Utah. Their defense isn't very good. And now they've showed up and they've replicated it against a top 10 defense. I think we should note that you did it last week, but it's becoming even more and more apparent. Noah Whittington is running the ball really, really well, and it's a huge boost for Jordan James. I mean, he doesn't have to carry the whole workload, because I'll be honest, I was surprised when you looked at the box score and you see, wow, 43 carries, 35 between Oregon's two running backs. They leaned into the run game, to Jared's point, and they were really successful. And I thought it was really interesting. Like, it really kind of set the tone, I think, of the mentality of what this game could be. At least Oregon's offense versus Penn State's defense there in the first quarter, where their first two drives, it was like, we are running right at you. We don't care that it's happening. We're running at your best players. And they had success. And that, even though they weren't able to replicate that in the third and the fourth quarter to the efficiency levels that they did in the first, like, that changed the game. And I felt like that was almost like a mission. Like, we've heard so much about these guys. We're going to go right at them and see if they're for real or not.
I thought that's a great point, Matt. I thought it was interesting that both teams did that.
Yeah.
Oregon had problems defending the run this year, and maybe this is a natural transition to some defense talk. It had been largely like outside zones off tackles. I mean, Penn State ran it between the tackles a lot. I mean, almost all their big gapping plays were Singleton or Allen between the tackles, and we just, Matt did a good job of illustrating how good Oregon's running back duo was. I mean, statistically at least, Penn State's was better, and I found that to be not hugely shocking, because we knew, and this is one of the things we talked about, they've got really good running backs. This is one of the better tandems in the country, and they utilize these guys a ton. So, like, I'm not shocked that they were productive, but I was shocked that the Oregon almost gave up 300 yards on the ground. Like, that was not amongst the things that were surprising. That was right up there with just how many points were scored in this game for me. And I guess, we'll get into what the postseason will look like, but this is now something that was not on my radar as a concern. That's kind of like low-key. I'm kind of like, well, what happened there? And I'm excited to go watch the game, and maybe we'll have some answers. But I just think back to what's happened most games this season, where it was teams would try to run at the center of the defense. This is Wisconsin especially, get stonewalled for a couple of drives and then go, well, let's try something off tackle. Penn State ran it between the tackles all night. And a lot of their best runs were right there at the heart. And frankly, I found that to be a little concerning. And there's other parts of this game that were obviously concerning for the defense, but I don't know exactly how to feel about that. Is that just a case of Penn State's got awesome running backs, a great scheme, as you said, Jared? Like, I'm excited to go rewatch this game, in part because of the Oregon victory, but just to kind of appreciate both offensive coordinators for dialing up some incredible games. And that was certainly one of the things at halftime, talking to some of the national guys. They were both like, God, these are probably two of the better offensive coordinators in the country, going back and forth. But like, is this something that we're going to be concerned about? Like, are there teams on the rest of not on the schedule yet, but are there teams that they could play in the playoffs that could do this same type of thing? Because I think that's a real concern. It wasn't something I was really worried about at all coming into this game. I thought Penn State would have some success, but that was a lot of running between the tackles and just a lot of success. It felt like, I don't know if they have the advanced stats of like rush success rate, but it felt like it was really, really high for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I mean, it was 8.3 yards a carry. I don't need rush success rate to tell me that that's really damn good, to be honest. But
yeah, true.
I had one more offensive thing before a little more defense. Shout out to the tight ends. Don't catch touchdown passes basically the entire season up until the last like 3 weeks of the year, and now there were 3 of them tonight. Kenyon Sadiq was great. Apparently his whole thing is coming out during bowl games or postseason play because he scored his first touchdown in the Fiesta Bowl last year, first career touchdown, and had 2 of them tonight. He's just a dynamic playmaker. I'm not sure how they get him the ball more because they have a bunch of weapons on this offense, but I think they should. I think it'd be a good idea if they tried to do that a little bit more often. But that's up to Will Stein. That's not up to me or anybody else who's telling him. And then Ferguson moves into the all-time record holder for tight end touchdowns, which is great for him. And he's going to have more games this year, but theoretically, like if this were his last, it would have been a great year to cap or a great game to cap off his career at Oregon. And then go ahead, Matt. You had something?
Oh, I was just going to mention that about the records. Eric talked about previously how Tez could have been number 1 in school history for receptions and yards, and I think he's cracked the top 10. I was looking at that earlier while we were waiting for receptions now, and also yards, career, and touchdowns. So he's not going to get number 1 like Eric thought he was projected to, but he could get close.
Yeah, and there's still could be 3 more games. Yeah, so it was a great night for the pass catchers, specifically the tight ends and Tez. But defensively, I have to rewatch it to know if it's a real worry. It seems like an aberration, and it seems like Penn State and Kotelnicki were just perfectly schemed up for what Oregon tried to do the best. And this is a really good Penn State offensive line. We talked about that, and like their run game was really good, but there could have been some pass protection issues. There was none of that tonight. I thought, again, that their scheme was great in terms of Aller trying to get the ball out quick, try to find Warren over the middle in the first half, and it worked a whole lot of times. And they actually went up-tempo a lot on tonight, which I didn't anticipate them doing. But, they caught Oregon with their pants down at least 2 or 3 times. One time Dan Lanning had to call a timeout. The other time it was a touchdown right over Nico Reed, who was still kind of getting the relay signals from Jeff over the middle. So I thought Penn State's offense was, I don't know, I'm no Penn State fan. I am no beat reporter for Penn State, but that was probably the best they've looked all season, at least like in my scouting of what they've done this year. It was great for them. And those are certainly some interesting concerns to go through to the next round. And, they're going to be playing the best of the best now. I know everybody wanted the bye so they could go play the 12 seed, but, that's not happening anymore. They're going to play maybe Tennessee, maybe Ohio State, whoever is in that 8-9 matchup. And there's going to be great offenses across the board no matter who they play. So this could be a problem. The unfortunate thing, maybe, is that we won't know for another 3 weeks if this is a real problem, if this is a carry-on problem, unlike a normal week-to-week basis where it's like, that's interesting. Let's wait until next Saturday to find out. Well, going to be some time.
I know you don't feel this way, Jared, and I think all 3 of us feel this way. Like, who cares if you have to play Ohio State in the first round? You're the only team in the country that has 3 wins over a playoff team. You have 2 top 5 wins next to your name. Like, at this point, you're going to play good teams at some point, and you've shown you're the only team that can beat them all. And if you have to play them in the first round, so be it. It sucks. Right. It's a tough draw. Maybe you lose it, but you've shown historically this season you're the best team in the country, and you're going to be the betting odds favorite by a wide margin, and everyone's going to know, like, it's going to take a big upset for you to lose in this game. And I don't think the way this game was played and the team that they played and the defense that they faced, and beating Boise State and beating Ohio State and going 13-0 and being the only one. Like, if they lose in the playoffs and they don't get to the conference champion, they don't get to the championship game, or if they lose in the championship game, like, it's going to be a disappointment. It's going to be sad, whatever. But I don't think anyone's going to look at this and be like, oh, Oregon choked it away yet again. Like, they clearly shown that they've gone through the gauntlet and they are the best team this season. So who cares if you play Ohio State in the first round?
Yeah, bring it on, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the case. And the other part is as the one who was out here, this was a road game, basically. I mean, like, I don't know the attendance split, but there was a lot more white than there was green here. They're going to play that game in Pasadena. They're going to have the edge there with whoever's coming in. I mean, regardless of if it's Tennessee, Ohio State. I know those are huge fan bases that travel well. I know for a fact that there are some Oregon fans who felt like we're going to hold off on these long trips because there's a runway to play a bunch more games. Why spend all of it to go out to Indianapolis when you could go to the Rose Bowl, in January? So I think, just obviously we're not trying to look too far ahead here, but that's something to kind of acknowledge in terms of what this postseason run might look like. But yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement, obviously. Like, I don't think there's a team in the country out there that you look at and say, oh boy, that's going to be impossible to win. Or like, oh man, they're going to be huge underdogs there. I think they'll be maybe slight favorites, but favored against basically any of these teams on a neutral, and especially when they're in the Rose Bowl with what will be a pretty friendly environment. So I also wanted to just kind of, the defense made a lot of mistakes, and I also think we kind of already touched on a little bit, but Dante and Nico saved the day to a large extent. And I think Nico's interception, while there wasn't a return on it, that's a hell of a play. I know I kind of question a little bit of the decision making from Aller to throw it up there like that, just considering that like Oregon hadn't been able to stop any of their base offense, and they had not tried to throw vertically really much at all. And when they had, it was schemed up perfectly, and there wasn't a jump ball like that. So why put yourself in that situation? I'm sure that's the conversation like Penn State's having on its message board at this moment. But a hell of a play by Nico. I mean, that's like a baseball Willie Mays diving catch, to finish a game. I mean, that's the other part. We've talked about how fun it was from a scoring perspective. There's just a lot of like really fun plays in this game. A ton of explosive plays, a ton of explosive plays that include like guys hurdling people making incredible catches in traffic. Tez's touchdown, where he's just, again, so much faster than everybody on the field and just making guys look silly. There were just a lot of individual plays that really stood out here that were fun, and I think speaks to the caliber of play in this game. Like, this was 1 versus 3, and while some people might debate whether or not these are the two of the 3 best teams in the country, there were certainly a lot of individuals in this game that are going to be big time players on Sunday, and I think that's something that stood out. And just one other thing, we kind of already talked about Abdul Carter being limited. 7 catches for 84 yards for Tyler Warren. Let's not mock that up as a win. What was our prop, though? Was it 84.5?
82.5.
82.5. He just went over it.
Gosh.
Only got to pick the over.
You got to pick the over. But my point was, like, I kind of feel like they did a good job on him to a certain extent. And
the second half, yeah.
And he did drop / not quite finish 2 or 3 that would have been really, really big. Again, I'm sure the Penn State fans feel like, I know James Franklin was griping about some flags he thought weren't justified. And
thank you for bringing that up.
We can get into that. I think
that was my one shining moment finish to the podcast. It was going through his transcript and reading his complaints about the officiating, which there weren't a lot of penalties in this game to begin with. They had 5 for 65. It was 4 personal foul penalties, and on review, they were all personal fouls. Like,
those are justified, right?
He went on national TV at halftime and said, "Those 4 are going to happen." Like, I can't say anything about him. Like, so he was understanding of 4 of the 5.
During halftime he was, post game he was not. I didn't get that, and it was, I don't know. He was clearly mad, and he was upset that he lost the game. And he was saying these things, but those were all personal fouls as far as I'm concerned. And his biggest gripe was the catch that wasn't called. which didn't really matter because they went down and scored anyway, I believe, on that same drive.
Yeah, no, they
If
did.
he really had a complaint, it would have been on Tez Johnson's 48-yard touchdown, because Oregon had 3 or 4 offensive line beyond whatever the 3-yard marker for an ineligible man downfield. Like,
Yeah.
that would have been something to gripe about. I get it, and it was some long soliloquy of just 400 words worth of talking about the officiating. It's like, buddy, there weren't any penalties in this game.
Yeah, well, and the funny part about that is that I don't think the question, he talked about it a couple times. I think one of the times, though, it was just totally unsolicited. It's like nobody was even wanting to talk about the penalties, but he clearly still wanted to talk about it. And then the other thing I'll bring up that I know I slacked or texted you guys, the Oregon locker room and the band was right next to where the press conference was going. And so for those who watched, you can hear and watch James Franklin get noticeably upset. And I don't really blame him for this, but Oregon's blasting the fight song as he's sitting there offering his kind of somber thoughts about a frustrating loss, and he has to turn and ask someone to go stop them from playing the fight song, which they did. But you could tell he was not in a great mood, and I don't necessarily blame him because your team lost. And
I get it. Yeah,
Matt, you ran through the stats. Like, he just doesn't win these big games, and this just kind of reinforces it. And frankly, they played really well in this game, but it's still Penn State doesn't win the big game, and that's not going to sit well with him, obviously.
What's really funny is about that band Franklin comment is someone in the band tweeted at me the video of them playing, and it's absolutely hilarious. They're just in this big room, and they're just freaking out, playing their music as loud as they possibly can.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I saw you posted something on the event. That's what that was. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't think it was like, I thought it was maybe pregame at first, but then I went back and kind of listened to Zach, our friend Zach Neal's video that he sent out of James Franklin complaining as they're playing. It's like, yeah, that's the band playing at the same time. These videos will line up perfectly.
Yeah, some interesting stuff there.
Can you blame the band? I mean,
I can't really
got all these instruments.
I can't really blame the band. I can't also really blame James Franklin for being annoyed by hearing the other team's fight song during his press conference, which was, by the way, it was like
win the game.
Yeah, win the game, but also like it was inaudible. Like you couldn't even hear him talk because it was like da 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 da. I mean, it was there. But
he had a mean quote after though on Neal's tweet. He goes, "I have no problem with them celebrating, but this is kind of a JV setup. Like, come on, man, we don't have to yell at the Big Ten communication people here. They're just trying to do their job."
Oh man, trying to think if there's much else here in terms of the game itself, because it's 3:30 Eastern Standard Time where I'm at. My brain's a little fried. Did we miss anything?
I don't think so. Other than, do we think like the run game issues are a concern? Jared brought it up like he thinks it's more of an anomaly. I am in agreement. I think there was a lot going on this week from a coaching perspective, and I think more importantly, they have an offensive coordinator that just runs a lot of funky stuff, and they have a guy that's very dynamic at a position that defenses historically just don't double team or bracket, because if you do, you get wide open touchdown passes like we saw happen against Oregon. They're not going to play another team unless they play Penn State again that will present this type of a problem from a formation tight end weird matchup type deal.
Maybe not a tight end, but how about Kenny Dillingham and the Sun Devils?
Sure.
And that's
baby.
That may be the 1-4.
Fun.
As you said, they may be the 1 and they may be the 4. I think they probably will. I would think Boise State with one loss would be the 3. And that's it's going to be interesting to see the seeding come out tomorrow. I just had one more thing, which was nothing to do with the game, but I risked my life climbing a fence to try to get to the shuttle after the game in like 19-degree weather. But your boy is okay. They locked the gate right in front of the shuttle, and so I had to scale. Me and Zach Neal, our good buddy, had to hike a fence and jump over it onto concrete, which was not exactly what I wanted to be doing at 2 a.m. But we're here.
No. Has anybody checked on James? Because I know he burns midnight oil.
Well,
no pun intended.
I guarantee he was on the last shuttle at 3 a.m, and I do worry about his ability to get up and over that fence. That could have been dangerous. That could be dangerous for somebody. It's like really cold out there. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see if we see it in Eugene.
Workers' comp, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. You should have fallen and had an injury.
I've got a little bit of a bruise on my calf because I hit the
Hey.
side of the fence, man. I know. I'll put something together. I'll file for that.
I think we should reach out to somebody.
All right, I think that's going to do it for us. Next time you hear from us will probably be Monday when we do some kind of a mailbag. Who knows? Maybe we justify a reason to do one tomorrow. I doubt it, but we'll see. Until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.